Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're letting all of the people in the waiting room in. We're glad that you're here. This is the San Francisco Bay Area Regional Conversation presented by Californians for the Arts. We're happy to see there's lots of people registered, so it'll take a little bit of time to let everybody in to the meeting. Hi, everybody, welcome. I see some friendly faces and some new people. We look forward to having you all here. Will somebody tell me when we have most of the people admitted into the room? Okay. Welcome, everybody. So nice to see you here. So while you're entering the room, you can complete our polls that you see on the screen. We'll be having some ways for you to be interactive with the meeting along the way. So please respond to the poll. Also, while we're gathering, you can, in the chat, put your name and the organization that you're with, the area that you live in or work in, including the city and the county. And we'd love it if you could please share the tribal lands of your location. Okay, I think we're still letting people in from the waiting room. Let's see. We're so glad that you could be here. It takes a long time to let 150 people in from the waiting room.
Yeah, I think we could go ahead and get started though.
Okay.
And so we can honor people's time. So
Okay,
thank
great.
you so much, Rachel. And I'm Julie Baker. I'm the executive director.
You know what, Julie, I didn't finish I was just waiting. I'll just finish my introduction.
No worries. I was just going to say hello. Oh, go for it.
Oh yeah, okay. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to cut you off. So welcome everyone. This is the San Francisco Bay Area Regional Conversation presented by Californians for the Arts. And as you just saw, this is Julie Baker, the executive director. Our goal is to gather and talk with arts community members from throughout the areas of San Francisco, Alameda County, the East Bay, and the North Bay. My name is Rachel Osajima. I am the director of the Alameda County Arts Commission. I am also a longtime board member of Californians for the Arts, and I am very happy to be the regional co-host of this event. The plan for today is to hear from a few speakers and then to have a group conversation. And we hope that this will be an engaging and informative meeting. We also hope to learn from all of you and to stay connected in the future. We will be recording this event, and the recording will be posted on the Californians for the Arts website. Let's see, during this event, please put your comments in the chat. We will be monitoring those. And we will be keeping a copy of the chat and your polls from the responses to the polls. And this information will inform Californians for the Arts about the issues and priorities of the San Francisco Bay Area, as well as the whole state. So now I'd like to invite Brad Erickson, my regional co-host, to take the lead.
Thanks, Rachel. So I'm Brad Erickson. I'm the executive director of Theater Bay Area, a service organization for theater in the Bay Area. I use he, him pronouns. I'm zooming in from Ohlone land. And I just want to reiterate what Rachel said. We're really, really glad to have you all here today because we want this to be a really interactive, real conversation with all of you. So we have some wonderful speakers and folks that we want you to have a chance to get to know at the start. We have some information that we want to share with you as well around updates in the advocacy world, both at the state, federal, and some local level as well. And then, as Rachel was saying, we really want to hear from you. So we've tried to balance this out kind of half and half in terms of presentation and then conversation with you all. So let me introduce folks who are here. You heard from Rachel. We also have with us today Victoria Hamilton, who is the board chair for Californians for the Arts, Julie Baker, the executive director, for Californians for the Arts, and Matt Carney and Jade Alicia Rivera, both staffers with Californians for the Arts. We're happy to have them here. And some local arts advocacy leaders that we want to give you a chance to meet and hear from. So first up is Susie Mckinnon, Director for Arts for a Better Bay Area. Susie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Brad. I'm so happy to be here. Good afternoon. Again, I'm Susie Mckinnon with Arts for a Better Bay Area, also known as ABBA for short. I want to thank Californians for the Arts for inviting us, and also thank you for all that you're doing during this critical time to advocate on behalf of arts and culture statewide. We can't thank you enough. And so I have just a little bit of time with you, and I'd like to share with you share some information about ABBA, who we are, and what we've been working on in this past year. If you're not familiar with us, we are a small but mighty organization that functions as a collective, and in most cases, our work is in collaboration with others. We launched in 2015 through a grassroots effort among local arts leaders. And our focus at that time when we got started and now is to build a network of artists, art workers, organizations, and advocates to help build connection amongst our community. And so in doing this, this enables us to better rise to the occasion of working collectively together towards building unity and common ground to advocate for increased support and equitable access to arts and resources for the arts. Many times our programs have been somewhat reactive and focus on the current needs and challenges of the time. And we've hosted many convenings and events and outreach initiatives to help inform and engage the community and advocate on behalf of the arts. A really good example of this is our work of the last year. And so starting early in the pandemic, we collaborated with other arts organizations, some of you who I think are here with us today, to build a relief fund for artists and arts workers. We built the fund focusing on areas and communities of the industry that had less available support and opportunities. We received over 400 applications and awarded 281 mini grants of up to $500. So we're really happy we had the opportunity to offer this support. And most recently, starting in the summer, fall of this last year, we developed an online series called Rebound, Arts, Equity, and Recovery. We have held 2 events so far and have brought together collectively approximately 400 attendees. We're in the midst of planning our 3rd online event, and so we hope you can join us for that in the coming weeks. The intent of the series is to help inform and connect as a valuable resource during this time of isolation, closures, and many times confusion in our industry, as many of you, I'm sure, are well aware. This concludes my time with you. I want to thank you. And I also want to encourage you to please learn more about us, join our mailing list, and to become a member. And you can do that by visiting our website. It's betterbayarea.org. And I'll put that in the chat for you all as well.
Great. Thanks, Susie. Next, I'd like to introduce to you all Marnie Cook, who is the Senior Director of Community Engagement and Volunteer Service for the San Francisco Symphony. She's also one of the co-leaders for Advocacy with the San Francisco Arts Alliance. Marnie. Marnie, I can't hear you. I don't know if anyone else can.
Well, let's see if this works now. Do we have it now? Fantastic. Mute strikes again. Anyways, it's great to be here this afternoon. Thank you, Brad and Julie and the entire team. I'm just one voice of many of the San Francisco Arts Alliance. And this alliance was formed over 20 years ago to actually bring the performing arts, the nonprofit performing and visual arts organizations together collectively to look at the broader needs of, specifically at that time, of San Francisco, and it's expanded on the state and federal level. It's currently co-chaired by Deborah Cullinan of YBCA and Matthew Shilbach of the Opera. And we're a mix of, we've also included a mix of representations from the community center, as well as Brad and Susie of ABBA, to be able to have a voice in the work that we've doing specifically in this last year. My focus has really been on the federal level, and would love to share with you guys that the messaging that we've been putting forth at the federal level has really actually made a difference, even starting this last March, when the CARES Act was put forward, in enabling the gig workers and the independent artists to be able to be included and eligible in federal funding, as well as the nonprofit arts sector to be eligible in that critical funding that took place. And we've been active in the space in DC with our national partners through this last passage in December and the ongoing work that's happening. But also not just on the federal level, but on the state and local level, we've been pushing forward some key messages to make sure that our legislators, our representatives are aware of just how critical artists, arts workers, and our space will be in the recovery and in the rebuilding of our communities. And so some of these messages that we've been sharing, we've been pushing forward, are that we are a necessary part of the rebuild and revitalization of our communities, that the nonprofit arts and culture organizations should be thought of as a small business, that we are major employers, that what we do and what we create impacts the overall ecosystem of small business. Our art, as you all know, attracts patrons, which frequent restaurants and shops and other neighborhoods and businesses, and we're a collective unit in that. And that eligibility in all of this is critical, whether we're talking at the local level, the state, or the federal. So that's been a primary focus for us in these days, but we've also been collectively using our knowledge to be able to help each other in reopening permissions at the local level. And as we continue to work with Julie and Brad and others at the state level, sharing that knowledge and being able to continue to strengthen that voice so that we can get to the reopening soon, and that we can all be part of this vibrant new phase, next phase in San Francisco and beyond. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Marnie, and thank you for all the work that the Alliance is doing. I want to introduce now Lori Fogarty, who is the Executive Director of the Oakland Museum of California and the co-leader of the East Bay Cultural Alliance. Lori.
Thank you, Brad, and thanks, Rachel, for including me. If you've never heard of this organization, it's because it doesn't really exist right now. It is a very nascent kind of gathering of like-minded folks in Alameda County. And I will say, tip of the hat to Marnie, it was our colleagues at the San Francisco Arts Alliance last April, John Moscone in particular, who reached out to my co-leader, if we are such a thing, Susie Maddox from Berkeley Rep, and said, we are beginning these advocacy efforts in the wake of the COVID response in San Francisco. What are you all doing in the East Bay? And we really realized we do not have a kind of organized structure, mostly because we're not a city and a county. There's Alameda County, and then there's many individual cities, Oakland, Berkeley, and beyond. So we thought if there was ever a moment not to let a crisis go to waste, we should try to galvanize a little bit and see where we could come together. And so we've only had about 3 or 4 meetings. We've reached out to folks that we could easily know between Susie and my, I would say Rolodex, and that'll date me, but my Rolodex and Susie's Rolodex. And we know we're not, reaching everybody yet. I will say I saw Roberto Bedoya, Cultural Affairs Manager from Oakland, on this call, and he was really helpful to us as well in getting the word out. We are still really figuring out in some ways what our purpose is and where we can be helpful. Rachel's been really helpful with us in connecting to the county. I will say most of us had never done advocacy at the county level. We had done it within our city. Some of us had had experience in the state. So I think we're really excited to see how we can be most useful to the efforts that are underway, not duplicate efforts, but also really make sure that the very diverse artists and cultural community, and I would say our alliance included non-arts organizations as well, the Oakland Zoo, the Chabot Space and Science Center. We reached out to the science and environmental organizations that are part of the UC Berkeley system. So we are here to learn, and if anybody is interested in, I see some of our colleagues are on the line, the Crucible and others, but if you haven't heard from us, please feel free. I'll put my email in the chat, and feel free to reach out. We are, as I said, very nascent, but eager to learn and eager to use this opportunity to really bring our voice to the table to legislators that have not heard a lot about the arts in our community.
Thank you, Laura. It's so really great to hear about what you're doing in Alameda County. Before we go to Julie Baker, who's going to give us an update on state level things, I want to pass this off just briefly to Victoria Hamilton, who is our leader at Californians for the Arts, is our board chair, and I would be remiss to not invite her to say a few words to all of you.
Thank you, Brad. Really, my words are very simple and heartfelt. We at Californians for the Arts, California Arts Advocates, are going to dedicate 2021 to Larry Bozza's legacy. He was an arts warrior, an amazing, effective leader, not only in the San Diego region, but all over the state. I know many of you loved and honored him. And so we're going to bring it home, Larry. Thank you.
Thanks, Victoria. And Julie, can I ask you to take it away?
Yes, you can. Thanks, Brad, and thanks to everyone for being here today. It's great to see familiar faces, new faces, and part of the goal of these meetings is absolutely to have a conversation as well as to make connections. So Lori, I'm glad that you are here today to further the connections of what's going on in this region and invite others to do the same in the chat and to really, speak up. This is not just for you to listen and or for you to just be passive in today's meeting as much as possible. We'd love to engage with you, hear from you. It really does inform our advocacy. I want to be very clear about that. In terms of these regional conversations, we do 9 across the state every 6 months, and it really helps to inform what it is that we're bringing up to the state level. And it also, as I was saying in the pre-conversation, it helps to inspire us. A lot of us who work in just the policy arena are talking about words in legislation, and translating policy is not always the most inspiring thing. So we'd love to hear from you who are doing the work and what we're all fighting for. So if you allow me, I will share my screen and do a quick presentation on what we've been doing. We are your statewide advocacy organization. We have both a nonprofit, Californians for the Arts, which is really to increase awareness and the value and impact of arts and culture and creative industries in California. And then we have a C4, which is a direct lobbying organization where we have 2 lobbyists on our team. I don't have to, share with you the devastating impact. I don't have to remind you of the devastating impact of what has happened to our sector. Also, I haven't had a chance to update the deck, but we just released our surveys, our own COVID-19 impact surveys that we just launched earlier this morning with the Otis report. And so if you're not on our e-list, please subscribe, because we just sent out some information about that. And then, what this previous slide, the Brookings Institute did a really important study that really showed that particularly the performing arts is going to be the most devastated industry from the impact of COVID-19. As we all are saying, the first to shut down, the last to reopen, and largest percentage of job loss specifically here in the state of California has actually been in the arts, entertainment, and recreation sector. I wanted to, and I'm trying to do this fast, so I'm just going to kind of quickly go through some of the stuff that we've been doing in order to amplify the work that you all do, and the importance of making sure that legislators and policymakers are aware of it and are producing legislation and resources to support our sector. So in this case, we did work on an assembly hearing. It was 2 or 3 weeks ago. The Arts Assembly Committee did an informational hearing, and I was one of the speakers. We had about 18 speakers, and out of that, actually, some very specific things happened, which were good for the sector. One of them is that you may have already heard, just this week, the governor signed a bipartisan legislation, SB 87, over $7 million all told in early action dollars to address COVID-19's impact on California. And inside of that, $2 billion of that are the Small Business California Relief Grant Program. And inside of that is $50 million specifically for nonprofit cultural institutions. This was out a direct result of our lobbying efforts along with California Association of Museums. Over 300 arts organizations that signed a letter, both to the administration and budget chairs, as well as 300 individuals who sent individual letters, and then of course direct lobbying meetings with legislators. We are the only sector that has actually been called out as one in the $2 billion relief package. We will have a closed application process in about a month to 4 to 5 weeks. There is no cap in terms of this budget size for cultural institutions, unlike the rest of the $2 billion. It's $2.5 million and less, and organizations. And also we will be a partner with Lendistry. And so we will be an intermediary to share out information as it becomes available on this particular application. So this is really good news and a big win for the sector, because once they understand the disproportionate impact, then more things should be coming our way. The other thing that I want to also be clear about is that we really need people to apply for that, because we want to show that we certainly don't want to leave money on the table. That's all I want to say. So definitely when you see those applications come out, apply, and if you need help, that's going to be our role, is to help you. It's really important that we continue to get media coverage. This is all about in terms of building our advocacy message. We've had a lot of media coverage throughout the state, as well as national media coverage on what's happening for the arts. And then I mentioned that we just released our impact survey. And we like to say we put the art in restart. There is no California recovery without the creative industries. Our reopening, our advocacy priorities currently are number one. Actually, there's no number one. They're all concurrent. But one of the challenges we face, particularly in the live events and performing arts industries right now in California alone, is that we have no guidelines for reopening those sectors. We are not in the blueprint for the economy that the governor uses, the different tiers. If you look for live events and performing arts or live theater in any tier, it says closed. There's one area where it says that if you can work directly with your local public health officers, if you're minimal and moderate tier, you can do outdoor performances for 50 or 100 people. That's all that's offered right now in the reopening guidelines. And clearly we cannot see forward if we don't know what's ahead. We need to have these guidelines to be able to plan for reopening. We understand the mechanics of what it takes for performing arts, which is certainly not a flip of the switch. In addition, of course, we also know museums are closed in the purple tier, although shopping malls and other things are open. And there's been a big fight for also to have some parity there. The other thing that we've been fighting for significantly, and also a direct relationship that came out of the assembly hearing, was that we are systemically undercapitalized in terms of public funding for the arts at the state level. The way that funding goes has traditionally been through the California Arts Council, which is the state arts agency, and it is ongoing funds of $26 million right now. For those who've been in this fight a long time, Brad, Victoria, Rachel, there was many, many years, over 10 years, where we were at $1 million. So 26 million sounds good. But when you look at it in per capita spending, that's 73 cents per person per capita in the state of California. So we are currently just starting a $1 for the Arts campaign. Assemblymember Sharon Quirk-Silva has introduced a budget letter to Phil Ting and Nancy Skinner, budget chairs, saying, can we increase this year to $1 for the arts? So we'll be there'll be advocacy around that we'll be sharing with you, and we would hope for your support to get that across the finish line. In addition, our advocacy has been focused on jobs creation for artists and for the continued recognition of artists as essential workers and arts organizations as critical businesses in our communities. And we need to, especially now while we're unemployed and vast unemployment for artists in our sector, we need to create programs like a WPA. And so the California Creative Corps is the first step in that. Deborah Cullinan was on the governor's task force. And so she was on the Jobs and Business Recovery Task Force and introduced this concept there. And then the governor introduced it in his budget in January for $15 million. At the same time, in order to establish this, not just as a pilot program, we're also pleased to be working as a sponsor on legislation, Senate Bill 628, which Senator Ben Allen introduced, and we'll be working to develop that language. It is currently sort of what we call placeholder language with certain deadlines. We need to get legislation in. It was last Friday. There were over 2,000 bills this session. It is a 2-year legislative session. It started this year for the next 2 years. So whether or not we get it through this year or if it goes next year, but you will see development of that language. And it really is specifically how do we employ artists throughout the state, and how do we get the public sector to truly recognize the impact that artists can make, whether it's storytelling, whether it's original works of art, whether it's in service to mental health, public health, whatever the crisis might be, racial justice, all the things that we know that we need to be fighting for at this moment. We also know that once we get to a place where we do know what the guidelines are going to look like, we have an anticipation that that's going to cost our businesses more to reopen. In other words, there's maybe going to be retrofits for ventilation systems, or maybe going to be needs for performer testing. And all of this comes with costs. While we've now been decimated from earning revenue because we've been closed for a year for many of us, or maybe you transitioned to online but haven't quite figured out how to monetize that, we're going to need extra funding to reopen arts safely. Other advocacy priorities, continued federal and state stimulus funding. This is a lot of the work that the SF Arts Alliance does directly with a lobbyist as well, which is making sure that that funding is coming to the states, for example. But when it does come to the states, we want to make sure that it goes to the arts and culture sector. So that's where we fit in terms of fighting for. We also understand now, I think that the pandemic has really highlighted sort of the vulnerability of the arts workforce. And I think that while we're looking at that in terms of long-term advocacy priorities, is how do we create better infrastructure and unemployment systems, or employment systems, both, to support living, housing, food security, and mental health for artists. You'll see from our own survey that actually out of the top 5 things that artists workers are looking for right now, one of them was mental health support. So we want to make sure that the infrastructure is there to really support this vital workforce. We also know that after the murder of George Floyd, what has been highlighted in our country in terms of racial inequity is also been highlighted within the arts sector. And it is the time for us to really look at our business models, radically reimagine them, our hiring practices, our board recruitment strategies and policies, our resources and programs, to center them first in racial equity. And then in our minds as an organization, we've determined that without racial equity, there is no cultural equity. So we need to start first there. New program delivery models and technical training and support continue to be advocacy priorities in terms of needing, again, if we're going to get to a place where we learned maybe during the pandemic that we can do things online and actually broaden some of our audience in terms of engagement and new audiences. Maybe that's something we want to add into our toolkit in a more sophisticated fashion, or maybe that's going to be something we're going to have to do for the next year until we can be in full capacity reopening. These are things that we know that many organizations need training in and support in. And then finally, many of you know that we've worked a lot on legislation, Assembly Bill 5, which changed the determination of how you classify someone as an employee or independent contractor, and primarily really pushes it towards people becoming employees, which if we know that 3.5 times arts workers are more likely to be employed as self-employed, it was a big impact to our sector to have to make a lot of those employees. So we're looking at follow-up legislation again this year. There's a Senate Bill 805 that was brought by Senator Rubio and co-authored by Senator Allen, and that is looking at an exemption for performing arts organizations with budget sizes of $1.5 million and under. That's the current placeholder language. We'll see if that develops. There's also another bill from Assemblymember Levine, Assembly Bill 1227, that we're also following. And I'm going to skip over all these so we can get to the conversation. How can you engage? We've got lots of toolkits and templates on our website, californiansforthearts.org. Easy ways for you to send emails and information, templates, phone scripts, tweet scripts, and so on for you to reach out to your own legislatures. You know, one of the things that we hear pretty consistently, and on a call this morning with Senator Allen, for example, is that they don't really hear as much from the arts as they might from other sectors. This is, I think, something that we're all learning to be better about in terms of adding again into our toolkits, and we are here to help you with that. We also do a lot of social media posting that is to create and increase the awareness of what's going on for our sector. So we encourage you to share that with us, share that out. And then in April, we have Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month, and we hope that you'll engage with us during that. This is really a moment for us to not only, again, highlight and amplify what's going on for our sector, but to celebrate and to talk about what is the positive impacts that we make in our communities and why we're so critical for social cohesion. And I'm going to use Roberta Bedoya's word, belonging. And finally, here's some very specific things that are coming up. We've got, for those of you maybe self-identify as someone who haven't not yet engaged in advocacy, we want to train you and help you to make that, demystify that process for you. So we're doing a training on March 12th. If you're interested in engaging with Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month, we'll be doing tips and tricks to engage with that on March 26th. And please, we'll put my information in the chat as well, but I really want everyone to feel that we are here to respond to your needs and to listen as well, so that we can truly do our best to represent you in advocacy. So that is the overview of kind of what we're up to at the state. And I will stop sharing and we can engage in conversation.
And I want to quickly, Julie, send it over to Marnie Cook for a moment, just for some updates. There's so much happening at the federal level, so that we can get a little bit of that information in front of folks and then have the conversation. So Marnie.
Sure. Hello, everybody. Again, I wanted to share with you some information specifically to the SBA activity related to the December relief bill, and then also make sure you understand the roadmap for this current American Rescue Plan, the 1.9 trillion rescue relief plan that President Biden has in discussion right now. So specifically to the December relief bill that was passed surrounding PPP on Monday, many of you might have seen the White House and the SBA announced that this Wednesday, yesterday, they put a freeze on all loans. And they're putting a 14-day priority period on companies, organizations that are up to 20 employees, not 20 employees, but essentially up to 19 employees. And when you talk about that number, it's about every head counts. So every single employee counts in that manner. And so if this is you, if you know of someone that has been trying to get a PPP loan through, that is a really, really small business, this is the time, priority time for them, because currently the PPP application process closes on March 31st. Now many of us are advocating for an extension of that, but please know that that deadline is coming up. If you had your PPP loan in process, it was received by the SBA and it was still getting worked on prior to this Wednesday, it's going to still get worked on. It's still going to go through. It's just, if you are above 20 employees and right now you put your application in, you start the process, they're not even going to accept it. They're not going to put it in a queue. It's not going to be deemed to be able to process. So you're going to need to wait, if you haven't started that process yet, until after March 9th to then be able to put your application in. So, and I will also put in the chat a link surrounding this information. And I know the SBA has been working to put clarifying guidelines of this up on their website. I haven't seen it yet, but they're looking for a new FAQ soon. Also surrounding a grant that was passed in December that many of us see as vital, the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant for both for-profit and nonprofit organizations. The big push right now is to have the SBA issue clarity around eligibility for this program, and then also when they're actually going to open up the portal. I know that for the application portal, they've been putting together a wide variety of webinars. I know that there are a few more that are scheduled for this month and into early next month. So if you're wanting to participate in them, I'll find the link to that site and put it in the chat as well for you, so that you can be able to learn more about what the SBA is thinking. But just know that on the national level, there's a lot of push right now to just get the SBA to administer those guidelines and to open that application portal. In regards to the 1.9 trillion new relief package overview, note that the goal for this is to get this done, signed, sealed, and delivered before the deadline of March 14th, which is where the unemployment, pandemic unemployment federal insurance expires. And so the goal is to get this all wrapped and rolled so that the unemployment insurance can be extended. And the current date for that extension, I believe, is at the end of August. So August 29th, 2021. So once this gets signed, what will be a relief to many is that we won't have to wait 3 months. We have that extension till the end of August. Also in this bill, there's monies for the NEA. There is also individual stimulus checks, $1,400 to qualifying individuals with incomes up to 75K and couples making 150K, with an eligibility phasing out at higher income levels. And there's also temporary fully refundable child tax credits, as well as extension of the shuttered venue operators grant. They're putting in about 1.25 billion more in funding. However, that's not enough to fully fund everybody. That is to actually make sure that the museum component is covered within the December bill. So we're still advocating for more money in that grant. Probably won't see it in the 1.9 trillion, but looking towards the next packages to be able to keep raising the profile of just how much critical need is necessary in that area. There's also more money going in for the payroll protection program, discussions around employee retention tax credit, family first paid leave credits. And then the really critical one, which we were so glad to see is still in there, is state and local relief. Because as we know, our cities are going bankrupt or projecting millions and billions of dollars of deficit in the coming years. And so this is really, part of this is to help with COVID relief, frontline workers, activities, but then also some of this is revenue replacement. So loss of revenue from whether it's hotel revenue or other mechanisms. This is to help offset that loss during this crazy pandemic time. So that is it in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions, but I hope this is helpful.
Thanks, Marty. And I'm going to hand it back to you, Julie, to lead the discussion that we really want to have with everyone who's online with us today.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Brad, and thanks again to all our speakers. So I just want to invite everyone into the conversation. If there's maybe specific questions you have for any of us in terms of what we've just spoken about, any of the programs, please raise your hand or add any comments in the chat. Or maybe there's things that none of us touched on that are really impacting your world and you want to share with us. Or do you want to share with us some of the silver linings that you've seen in this last year that have helped you to be maybe, more to be better at what you're doing. So please, we invite you now into the conversation. Does anyone have anything? I can't see because it's in the spotlight mode, which I don't really want. So I'm going to see if there's anyone leaning in who wants to add into the conversation. Anything you want to share? This is your time. It's not always us talking. I know San Francisco and the Bay Area and the region has some opinions. So I know that you guys have things that you want to talk to us about or share with us.
Julie,
Yes.
I can't find a way to raise my blue hand, so I'll just
Good.
jump
in, Susie, please.
Yeah, I've already mentioned this to you, but I'd like to put it out there to see if it registers for anybody else. We are really interested in exploring whether in this moment we might get a short term, a 1 or 2 or even 3 or 4 year waiver on sales tax paid by nonprofits. Those of us who come from out of the state are always shocked when we get here and find out that in California, as nonprofits, we pay sales tax. We figured out that for our organization, that could save us about $250,000 in each of the next few years. So in thinking about the scale of what we would get from these California Arts Council grants, which is lovely, and some of the other things that we're looking at, which are lovely, the impact of something like that would be so enormous. I just want to put it out there, see if it sings for anybody else.
Thanks, Susie. And yeah, Susie and I did talk about that. And is there anyone else who pays a lot of sales tax, on things that you're purchasing for your nonprofit that would really help you in these next couple of years? If that's the case for you, you can certainly share in the chat or just jump in the conversation. And if you can't find your little hand, you're welcome to just do exactly what Susie did, which is just jump in. We want to hear from you. And there was one question from Lori asking when that shuttered venues operator grant will be released. It's the $15 billion question currently in the federal government. And because in the regulations, it said 45 days from the enactment of the legislation. We've been past 45 days, even with Sundays counted, I think, at this point. So I guess they're not getting fined for not releasing it yet. But I know Marnie and others follow it pretty closely. And it's incredibly frustrating because literally even their wording changes from 24 hours. That has massive impact for many of us. So I don't know, Marnie, do you have any better sense of when it's going to come out? Yeah, nobody does. Nobody does. It's always amazing what happens in, you can get things passed in legislation, but then when it gets translated into actual, like, you know, how it gets distributed, that's when there's two phases in terms of advocacy and work that go on. Get it across the finish line and then get into the details, which Marnie and John Moscone and many others have been greatly involved in at the federal level.
Hey, Julie, there's a question about when we might get guidelines about reopening.
Well, that's the, that's the how big is our industry here in California? That's the $250 billion question, or maybe, yeah, we absolutely have been fighting that fight since July of last year when we started the conversation with the California Department of Public Health and GoBiz. We're currently really trying to get some media awareness about it. The museums have done a really good job of getting attention around this issue. For purple tier, the rest of the live performance, but they don't talk about the fact that the live performances are not even on the tiers. So we need to like start elevating that issue. And again, in conversation, happened to be again with Senator Allen on this thing we did earlier today, you know, he said that it's a lot has to do with pressure. Although I have to say Disney has put a lot of pressure and Disney's not open yet. So I think it's a real balancing act. You know, public health is trying to keep people safe. This is a really frightening pandemic, as we know, and it has, you know, we've lost a lot of people to this. So we want to do it safely. What we know, though, that we're asking for in terms of reopening guidelines is not to reopen when it's not safe, but to give us the guidelines so we know what is expected of us in order to reopen. And when are we on the recovery roadmap so that we can plan? It's pretty disheartening for people to not even see your sector in minimal and moderate, which, what does that mean? When do we reopen? When this whole thing is done? When is that? And so that's sort of what we're trying to illuminate. In fact, there was also just a study that came out of Berlin that has now shown that museums and theaters are safer if you're wearing a mask than shopping, public transportation, all these other things that are open when we're not. So we'll continue to fight that fight and invite you to, when you are hopefully advocating and speaking to your legislators, your electeds, particularly at the state or local level, that you let them know that this is an issue that we need to really address. So that's a long-winded answer, just way to say, I don't know.
Julie, there's two questions, both about finding details on the waivers for 50 to 100 people in outdoor settings and where people can find that, and if we know what those details are. Is it local? Is it state? Any info on that?
So there is one section on covid19.ca.gov. Is that what you're talking about in terms of where it says that in minimal and moderate, you can have 150 people outside? That's all it says. And then it says to contact your local public health to work on those one-off event guidelines, which we are also saying is not equitable. That if every person has to create your own guidelines, that's really only the people who have capacity to do that, which tends to be some of the larger organizations. Our small organizations don't have the capacity to write their own guidelines, submit them to your local public health. and then work to get those approved. And so we want to have state issued ones. So anyway, the short answer is that it's just one section that I found on the governor's website that I'm happy to share.
And Julie, we have another question. Someone had her hand out. Margaret McCarthy, would you like me to ask for you, or would you like to go ahead and take the mic?
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, my question is about negotiating with landlords, both for rent relief and also for eventual reopening costs. If we have to make infrastructural investments in our space, the landlord is going to be the ultimate beneficiary of that. But left to their own devices, we do not have confidence that they will make the infrastructural investments necessary for us to reopen.
I mean, anyone is welcome to answer. It doesn't have to be me. So you're saying that how do we advocate to make sure that if you're renting, that they're taking on the sort of tenant improvements to retrofit your space in order to reopen? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. That's an excellent question that I hadn't. And see, this is why we do this, because this was not something I thought of, because I work out of my home. So anyway, so Margaret, thank you for that. And I will, I don't have an answer, but that's something we can certainly bring to legislators. And if you have a relationship with your state representative, that's something you should bring up to them, because I think that's an excellent point.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Then Roberto has a question next.
Hello, everybody. A couple of questions. First, on the reopening, obviously, I'm in Alameda County. I'm beholden to what the county health officials sort of how they act. Berkeley has their own health official. San Francisco, you're the city and the county. So that just speaks to the bureaucracies associated with our various municipalities and our relationship to the health departments. So I'm just bringing that up to be mindful of the state issue guidelines that could be replicated locally is very, very important. I don't want to open that door because my presenters at the Fox or the Paramount, and they're all commercial entertainment folks, are really aggressive about reopening, and they're part of the NEVA collection. But I want to shift a little bit more towards the experiences that I know I'm facing and San Francisco is facing and San Jose is facing with the loss of the bed tax and TOT, whatever your cities call it, and how it will impact our grant making, which is really, really interesting to figure out where the replacement strategies that may be percolating, and whether federal aid is mindful or state aid is mindful of this particular loss of a revenue stream and intentional about helping address that loss, because it's very specific for the cultural sector. In my city, as we are facing so many losses, and so many other issues, that revenue stream, which was for us, is really losing. That is going to be hard to recoup. So I guess I want to applaud your advocacy, Julie and Marnie, about the fact that we're trying to get some government relief very specifically related to the loss of those revenues, which are so important to the cultural sector.
Absolutely, Roberto. I mean, I know that, I think one of the things that we're all trying to identify, and this has been identified, as you know, because we were on a call about this specifically, which is that this is one of the gaps. TOT tax it pays for a lot of local arts agencies, and that it comes through your city or municipality's budget. And but that's not something that like the state or the feds directly are thinking about. They're thinking about money to the state or money to, and then the state thinks about money to the cities and the counties and municipalities. then you all have to fight individually to go get your TOT tag or to replace that loss for the arts. And so we are looking at trying to elevate that issue, at least at the state level, to make them aware so that that is a gap, because I don't know where we're going to find that money unless, again, cities get the funding, and then it's a determination of how they prioritize their funding and where they put it. And if they don't prioritize the arts, then and you get a lot, and you normally are funded by TOT tax, and that's been decimated, then we're going to be in a fight for our lives. So if we can elevate it to the state level and sort of mandate it, that comes out of federal funds, that would be great. I don't know how realistic that is, but I can certainly say we're floating the conversations around that.
Thank you.
Julie and maybe Marnie, there's a question here around SBA and PPP, wanting some clarity, wondering if we have any clarity around new guidelines for the smallest businesses that have just a few employees that would allow them to take a larger draw. I know that I've been hearing about some changes there, and I just wonder if we have some information on that, either Julie or Marnie.
Sure. I'm happy to, I posted in the chat, and also hopefully we can maybe in a recap email share some resources for you guys of what's been shared out. But there are guidelines on SBA that will send you links very specific about application process and some really good rule making to be able to make this clear and easier for you. So let's just say that I would much rather point to the SBA language than to be able to interpret it myself. I also wanted to just go back, Roberto, to your question really quickly. The state and local relief right now in this 1.9 trillion plan, it's a 60-40 split. So 60% of the funds right now will go to the states, 40% to localities. And so what will be really interesting to Julie's point is that once it funnels down to the county and the city, is exactly how those how our city leaders are going to choose to use that revenue replacement funding from the federal government to be able to, as they're looking at their budget years, and see how that can then help affect the necessary funding for the arts and for other community programs that will desperately be needing this. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you for that. And let me just sort of say, and each one of our municipalities are so different. My transit tax does a zoo, does a museum, does a convention bureau, does my shop. Other cities do other things. So if there's a way in which we kind of can advocate that these replacement opportunities can rebuild those losses, that might be beneficial for us.
You know what I think, Roberto, what makes me think is that this is going to be a fight across the whole of the state on a local level. And so what maybe we should do is develop some talking points and a sort of a good advocacy toolkit for that specifically for local advocacy. And maybe we could work with you and SF Arts Alliance and others, ABBA, to kind of develop that toolkit so that when those funding, hopefully that 1.9 trillion gets through the federal government and the 40% gets distributed eventually, we're armed and ready to show up and make the case for the loss of the TOT tax that has, decimated arts funding in our communities. So we'll work on that.
Thank you.
There's a couple of other questions in here. Well, one person is asking this, it's great kind of teed up for you here. What is the most important thing that we should be advocating with our state leaders for? There's so many pans in the fire. What is our number one ask?
I really think that depends on what is what it is that you're passionate about and your particular circumstances. I mean, our approach has been, particularly this year, and I'll be honest with you, there's more money at the state than they expected. They all anticipated this huge deficit. And if you might read the headlines where they keep saying, oh, look, there's $11 billion more than we thought. And so that's why they're able to release things like these, $2 billion in small business grants and that sort of thing. So, I think, and it's Lenore who asked the question. I mean, I think if your passion is to see funding increase for the arts, because we know that we're so underfunded, then push for the dollar for the arts, and talk to your legislators about that. If your passion is that artists need to be, seen as essential workers, and that we need to create a WPA-like program because that was so critically important to the development of culture in America, and we need to renew that in a sense, then I would say fight for the California Creative Corps. I would also say you can do it all at the same time. I can tell you, I have meetings with legislators like 2 or 3 times a day, and here are the 3 top bullet points of what you want. I agree you can't come in with 15. 15 is challenging, but 3 they can usually handle. If you're Susie, sales tax is what you want to fight for. So I think everyone's going to come to the table kind of with what is their own particular. If you're Roberto, it's going to be the loss of TOT tax and local arts agencies. Our job is to prioritize, fight for as many of those as possible at the same time. And we're really pleased that in this year, we were able to get $50 million for cultural institutions. We're having a budget introduced for $1 for the arts, and we've got California Creative Corps in play. That's a good year for us in terms of getting all of the things and hopefully reopening guidelines going soon. But there's always more. And I think it's a matter of also speaking very much authentically from your heart in terms of your experience with your own legislator. All politics are local, and that's no joke. They are elected and they are beholden to their constituents. So I can talk to Assemblymember Chu, who's a great art supporter, but he's going to be really listening to the people in his own districts who are in the arts more than he's going to hear from me, because I'm more like a lobbyist in his mind. So, it's important that you do your individual conversations with your local electeds, whether it's city, state, or federal.
Great. There is a comment in here about San Francisco and its hotel tax, and the story that many of us saw recently in the Chronicle. Yes, I think that many of us are pleased to see that the mayor and the city is committed to funding the arts. We also want to make sure that Prop E, as it was written, is fully implemented. And so we're in conversations with our leaders around that now. There's another question here around, can you share any developments around SB 805 that you mentioned earlier, Julie?
So sure, it's really early in the bill process for the year. Like I mentioned, they all had to be introduced by February 21st. And so over 2,000 bills were introduced. A lot of times when they're introduced, they call them like spot bill language, placeholder language. It starts just with that. So if you look at SB 805, it's pretty, it's a paragraph. It will continue to develop. And in fact, we have a meeting tomorrow with Senator Rubio's office, as we'll be working, as we've been working on that issue for 2 years, we'll continue to work on what we can do to support the sector. But I also always want to balance it with the message that at the same time as we want to, make sure that we're not putting small budget arts organizations under with the 1-2 punch of COVID and AB5. We also at this really do ultimately want to get to a place where people in our sector can afford to be in the industry and are getting a living wage. And so ultimately that is our goal. And so it's to me, it's a bit of a tension, but at the same time, we understand because we're so undercapitalized as an industry that many arts organizations cannot afford to make, particularly in the way that we work, particularly for theater and particularly for small budget theaters and the on-ramping that you do before people get union contracts and everything else. Why we understand the business model of what it is currently, but at the same time, we also understand that arts workers are suffering, and we want to make sure that we are taking care of the people within our own industry.
I want to point out that Ron Muriera, another of our board members and vice chair, has joined us. Ron is in San Jose and is the one of the leaders of the San Jose Arts Advocacy Group. Ron, do you want to just maybe greet folks from the southern part of our Bay Area region?
Yeah, sure. Sorry I'm late. I had another Zoom meeting. We were planning actually for the South Bay winter. So I just want to welcome everyone from down south in San Jose. and glad to see such a great attendance for this very essential and important webinar and conversation. And also just to contribute to what was being said with regards to, funding for the arts at the local level, San Jose is going to see a detrimental impact on our funding for arts and culture, which comes through TOT, which is the transit occupancy tax, which funds a large majority of our arts and cultural grants and programming in San Jose. So with that, again, it's a pleasure to be here with everyone this afternoon.
Thanks, Ron. Julie, there's a question here. It's interesting. I don't know that I know about this. So I'm just going to read it. Vital Arts is working with a coalition of local land trusts and others to make sure artists are able to qualify and take advantage of SB 91 recently passed, which will provide 1.5 billion in statewide relief for back rent. They're working, waiting for a green light to begin outreach in the East Bay and want others to be aware of this pending resource for unemployed individuals who are facing displacement or eviction.
I can speak to that if that's appropriate.
Invite Catherine into the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Okay, so I just found out about this. It's moving very fast. The legislation was approved just about a week ago. Proposals, the idea was to pass the money to LISC, which is a lending coalition to distribute throughout the state. And they reached out to 300 providers that they're aware of and former grantees to put in proposals for, on the local level, doing outreach, preparing applications, and reaching populations at highest risk. Here in the Bay Area, we've been working very closely with a number of, pretty much all the Bay Area land trusts, mostly across the East Bay, on ways to support moving artist spaces from the market economy and different ways of keeping space permanently affordable and ownership strategies, et cetera. So we've been asked, along with DIY spaces, to help with outreach because the artists typically get overlooked in these type of programs. And we are working with a coalition of artists and spaces that are very low income, that are in great danger of displacement, that are right on the edge. And we know, for example, the amount of unemployment in our sector is very, very high. So the bill does provide for it does pay for 80% of back rent and ask that the landlord forgive the remaining 20%. If the landlord accepts this deal and they get, 80 cents on the dollar, then there is a period in which they will not be able to, evict. But also, if they don't accept the deal, they have an extension of non-eviction deadline. What we're trying to do is work with artists who are in households that are non-traditional, often in live-work spaces. The bill has been written in such a broad way that a lot of non-traditional housing will qualify, which is not the case with most affordable housing programs. So I just want to make people aware of it. If we are selected or we know who's selected in the Bay Area, I will let you know. But it's an incredible resource and it is going to be a mad, supposedly applications are going to start being accepted next week. I don't know if anybody's going to be ready, but the first tranche is going to be distributed in the month of March. Program is expected to extend for 7 months.
Wow.
The first bank of money is going out by March 31st.
Thank you for that. That's amazing.
Yeah, Catherine, thank you for bringing that up too, because it's so important for us to remember to, when 2,000 bills get introduced and thousands of others are there, it's so important for us to look at the other issues that really directly impact our sector. And housing is such a massive one, particularly for artists who cannot afford to be in our urban cores anymore. And how are we going to address that? And when we as an organization, housing is a big issue for us. To look at in terms of policy development. So thank you for that. And I had read about it, but it was not at the, Lenore, the priorities there's so many. So thank you for SB 91. I was just looking at it. So we'll continue to track that as well and keep in touch with us if we can help amplify it.
Yeah, I mean, our first calls, if we get, as part of this coalition, if some of the money is going to come through the coalition of Bay Area land trusts, we're also working with land trusts down in Los Angeles. I'll be calling Roberto, I'll be calling everybody for mailing lists and we'll be trying to do direct outreach. But part of what we're going to be including is actually helping people, sitting down with people and walking them through the application and guiding them if they have non-traditional circumstances.
Army.
Thank you, Catherine.
Great. Julie, there's a question here about, are there any explicit countywide or statewide efforts that are in direct support of the various defund police, refund community frameworks that are in full swing in places like Oakland, and how can folks know about that and support those efforts?
Cindy Kamlager has a bill called the Crisis Act, which she tried to get through last session and it didn't, but it's been, she's brought that again. And it is really the concept of other organizations that could provide better, services other than the police when there are crisis calls. And so that's something that I think you should look at. I can find the bill number. We're actually been trying to get arts and culture organizations in the bill language, and because we want to show the correlation of arts as part of community healing and also arts integration into ways that we can also be a part of that process of responding to crises. So that's one I know of at the state level. Again, I'd have to sort of weed through and try and track the others, but happy to if that person wants to reach out to me further. I don't know about counties. I don't know, Alameda is on the call, other counties.
Okay. Matt, do we have any hands raised that I can't see?
Not at the moment, thank you.
Okay.
Matt, is there anything in the polls that you think would be helpful to also share in terms of what we've learned?
Yeah, one thing I noticed, a lot of us, over 70% transitioned to online programs during this time and during the pandemic. I just wanted to see if anyone had any positive stories of how changing that program to be online, what that looked like for you, and does that look like sustainable programming that will happen post-pandemic? Are we sort of shifting out of the response, and did anything create in the 78% of you that did online program, anything create that will stay with your organization? Roberto?
Yeah, with some CARES money, we provided a technical assistance opportunity to artists and individuals working with youth radio, YR Media, and Youth Speaks. And it was mainly focused on the hip hop music community and how to make their digital platforms robust and how to monetize their digital presence. It really was very successful. It was also very focused on Oakland's musicians and hip hop spoken word artists. So they were good partners for us. Youth Speaks and YR Media and Zoo Labs. So I think there's a new form of technical assistance that's unfolding and how to figure out how to create these networks in a time of social distancing. Most of our orgs just, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm started. So this was an opportunity to kind of help our artists and arts orgs.
Thank you. Margaret?
Margaret Thornberry from Fremont Cultural Arts Council in Fremont. And every year we have had, traditionally for 30 some odd years, Las Posadas, where we march from the old mission church to a local business and enact the Las Posadas tradition. And then they let us in and we have live music. And of course we couldn't do it this year. So took a lot of work. We got every artist to film their show and we gave a virtual Las Posadas, and we had 2 or 3 times as many people participate. So I think that we will probably go forward with a somewhat hybrid organization for that particular event from now on. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
That's great. I'm wondering if there's artists on the call. I'm sure there are, I would assume. I don't have the results of the first poll in front of me. And many arts administrators are also artists. Many people wear multiple hats. And if the concept of the California Creative Corps, WPA, is of interest to you, and if it is, I'd love to hear from you in terms of what you would want that program to look like. So I'm just going to leave it there. That's one question I have for particularly the artists in the crowd. Don't be shy. You got to be tired of hearing from us. All right.
You say something more about that, please?
Sure. Thank you for that question. So, yeah, so both in the governor's budget and in now legislation, there is a concept that was now out there called the California Creative Corps. And the idea being on the short term in the pilot program, the concept is similar to what Yerba Buena Center introduced in San Francisco and Latino Center of Arts and Culture is introduced in Sacramento. And we've seen programs now in Santa Monica and a number of other places, but is to hire artists in local communities and within the practice of art to share public health messages and particularly around the behavior change that we need to adapt, as well as vaccinations and the safety around vaccinations. Concept is that right now, government is the one who's sending out these messages, and there's sort of a, not Roberto and Rachel, but there's a somewhat distrust of government out there. And so when they're the ones delivering these messages, it's not necessarily the most persuasive fashion or form. We also know that artists not only are persuasive and excellent communicators, but they're also and important storytellers, but we also know that sometimes these messages need to be delivered in culturally specific ways. So as an example, in Sacramento, the Latino Center had 7 different artist corps. They used CARES Act funding to create this program. And one of the corps was the Visual Arts Corps, and they created a coloring book that were images of your abuela making a meal outdoors, wearing a mask, and then they distributed them in food packets so that they were making sure they were getting to these communities that have been disproportionately impacted by COVID, and sharing examples of how the arts can really kind of deliver messages in a special fashion. But it employs artists at the same time. So that was sort of the concept of that very specific pilot program, because we're still in a public health crisis, and how do we get through that? Second phase of it is more of a broader program of, a lot of times we look to artists for hope, health, healing, all the things that we know that arts bring to our lives and our communities, but we don't necessarily compensate artists for those services, but instead expect that that's going to happen. And so the idea of a California Creative Corps is both a training as well as a real formalization of saying, we want to pay artists for this direct work that they're doing to our community's health outcomes. And that could be integration into housing and infrastructure. It can be integration into homelessness issues. It can be integration into dealing with mental health and trauma, all of those sorts of things. So the idea is that on one hand, it's also around like what the WPA was like, which is we need our storytellers. We need our storytellers desperately now, but we need also post-pandemic, we're going to need times to really to understand this. And in the WPA, they literally gave artists in the Federal Theater Project, there were 50, they all did the same productions in 50 different states and things like that, where we were creating art because we knew how much we needed it. So that's a kind of the basic, overall big picture concept of what it is. Does that make sense to people?
So what are you looking forward to in this thing? when you say what do artists have to say, what are you looking from us artists?
I would just love to know if that's something that sounds like something you would care to be a part of, that if it were offered by the state and then distributed into local communities, if you would see yourself in that and say, yes, that's something I would apply for, maybe get a contract. We're also trying to get away from grants so much as more contracts. So we establish artists again as valuable workforce versus a cause. That sort of idea.
Yeah, sounds good.
Julie?
Yeah.
Hi, it's Lenore. I wanted to speak to what you said a moment ago when you asked about the good things that we found out from digital programming and successes that we had, about 4 things that I think they're overarching. One is that it gave us the opportunity to more closely connect with our donors and board members in a period of high touch, which has been so critical for us. The second is that throughout the country, people have been finding extraordinary expanded reach, and that their audiences, because they're not just they're sitting in seats and they're digital. I've been to so many events where I'm seeing people from Uruguay and Bulgaria and Israel and New York. I mean, people can come to you from all over the world. And that's something that was really unanticipated. I think the third thing and the most important is that all digital events are packed with data so that everything we do is absolutely measurable. And all you have to do is take a basic Google Analytics course or have somebody on your team who can do that, who can look at the back end of everything you're doing and see how really, really important that is. And the fourth thing I would say is that all over the place, these digital programs are giving us an opportunity for unexpected and new collaborations and partnerships that we didn't expect before, and that we're taking advantage of opportunities. I listened to a podcast a while ago, and the speaker said, "You're the creative sector. You know what to do. Be creative." And so these are things that I think we would never have expected, but that we have now the means and the opportunity to do if we set our minds to it.
That's great. I totally agree, Lenore. And I think one of the things that I think to highlight too is the measurable piece. I know a lot of times, the impact of what we do, it might be more anecdotal, but I think that there's a lot of times we can really measure direct impact, whether that's in terms of jobs creation, in terms of who we're working with and who we're serving, those sorts of things. It's really important for us to be able to say that this program was successful in the following ways. So whenever you're doing any of those work pieces, definitely trying to help with the measurable impacts is really helpful in our case making for sure.
Right, and just the one last point, I just came from a Capacity Interactive live stream about the marketing lessons we've learned in arts marketing. And one of the things that has been really apparent, according to the data from Capacity Interactive, is that we've transitioned from interruption marketing to permission marketing. And now it's changed again, because the number one way that people are participating in the arts has to do with word of mouth from friends and family. And so the messages from the institutions is not primary, it's secondary. And this is across all art sectors all over the country. And this is something new that we've learned that we need to take advantage of. For those of you who don't know about Capacity Interactive in their CI to I, they have outstanding online resources. And this was something I just listened to this morning. And I really highly recommend it. It's all about the lessons of marketing in the arts during the pandemic.
Great.
Thank you.
Julie, I just want to point out there's a number of folks in the chat who are really artists who are talking about the importance of, if we can have any influence on this, that the Artist Corps be run with, that it would be a payment and not a grant, that these would be payment.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because if you look at other government systems, a lot of times they are contracts versus grants.
And that's what folks are saying is really would be important.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So the most recent panel, I think, also poll that we just did, I mean, unless someone else has something to add, I'm just going to keep trying to continue our conversation here, but was about current advocacy efforts. And this is something for us to understand because we really, many of us, I'm sure Susie and Marnie and Brad and myself and our board members and our staff want to understand how we can support you better to become advocates. So the good news is that 71% of you have connected with your elected officials in the past 3 to 4 months. That's great. Virtual visits, phone calls, town halls, emails. Maybe you sent templates that others have sent out, et cetera. All of that matters. Let me just reiterate how important all of that is. If we send out an action alert, I'm not doing it because we want to just get some busy work done. We're doing it because we from our own lobbying experience understand that the more that they hear that there's a problem, the more likely they are to solve the problem. If they don't think that there's a problem or they're not hearing from our sector, they're going to say, okay, the arts are okay. I guess they're doing all right. They're figuring it out. Or maybe the private sector is taking care of them. We really need to hold the public sector accountable to make sure that arts are accessible for everyone. And then it's interesting to see who you have contacted. 49% of you contacted your city council, so it's just great. You're keeping local and you're continuing your conversation locally, which is really important. 7% have done school board. I happen to actually just be a recently elected school board member in my community. So that's great. Make sure if arts education is something really important to you, show up at your school board meetings and do it consistently. County 27%, state representative 31, and federal representative 31. And then there's 29 of you, 17 of you said you had not connected with your elected officials. You don't have to raise your hand and say I'm one of those, but it would be helpful. And don't be shy, because I can tell you before I took this job, I didn't even understand the difference between Congress and state. So, I mean, like, when was the last time you took a civics class? It was a long time ago. Why aren't you contacting your elected officials, and what can we do to help you to become more engaged in advocacy? Is there anyone who'd be willing to speak to that? Don't be shy. And if you don't feel like speaking, you can put it in the chat, and we will learn from that. Again, part of our work, particularly at Californians for the Arts, is to really help you to become better advocates. I know sometimes it's hard when it's like, oh my gosh, another thing you want me to do today. And I know all of us who run our advocacy organizations, we do our best to try and make it as easy as possible for you. But they're relationships. They're relationships like any other relationships you develop. It's just like you develop relationships with your donors, your funders. Think of them as that, except that you actually elect them. So they're even more beholden to you in that way. Roberto, you want to add to that conversation?
Sure. Since I'm a city, I'll speak from the city point of view. I have a commission who acts as ambassadors and advocates, and they do most of the advocacy work. So they kind of are given the charge, because I can't really tell my bosses to give me more money. I do, but it really, I'm an employee of the city. So they're pretty aggressive about advocating for the division. But I also need to point out, I think that we have not talked about as a whole group. So much it has been about recovery and revenue losses and how we're pivoting and stuff like that. There's still what the pandemic has realized, there is a tension still between big and small and BIPOC versus white. So the question of racial equity is in the foreground of my commission. And I think it's in the foreground of a lot of work in Oakland. So the question of racial equity and how we advocate for a more, in this moment of reimagining our cultural philanthropic landscape, is not abating, it's probably growing. So my community is pretty considering the incidents that happened in Chinatown here recently, that's sort of kind of, these things that are percolating.
Absolutely. Rachel, you have your hand up. I don't want to speak.
Thanks. I'm Rachel Osajima with the Alameda County Arts Commission. Again, I just want to say first, I see a number of my appointed commissioners for Alameda County here, so thanks for joining us. I would say for everybody, it's a wonderful idea if you know who your elected official is at the county level. Many of us think of our city elected officials first for things that we need or we're concerned about, but the county officials have a lot of activity and responsibility, so I would definitely encourage everybody to learn who is your elected official on the county level and to reach out to them. Sometimes they're not working specifically on things that relate to arts, culture, and creativity. But for example, March is Art as Education Month and April is Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month. Alameda County Board of Supervisors just made a proclamation on Tuesday to support those 2 months. So if you were involved, if you're an artist or an arts organization, you could send an email to your county elected official and just tell them what you're doing during March. You know, sort of start a dialogue, have some positive news in March about arts education, or April about anything you're doing in the arts. And then later, you know, when you want to ask them for something, funding, you have this positive relationship. So if you're starting with, I want to contact them, but I'm not sure what to say, this is a perfect time to do it.
And Rachel, thanks for bringing up Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month, because we're in the last few minutes of our time together. And I want to make sure that I pass the microphone over to Matt, who can tell us more about what is up with Arts, Culture, and Creativity Months and other ways that folks can continue to stay involved. Matt.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you. So great to see everyone here and hear the wonderful things going on in San Francisco, such a leader in the state. I just invite you to check our CFTA events page. There's a lot of things coming up. On March 12th, we have the Advocacy 101. This will be for maybe different levels on your board of directors, different levels of staff, learning how we can advocate in very, very different ways. And then that'll follow up in March 26th, where we'll do arts, advocacy, and action, and just talking about all the preparation for Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month, including Advocacy Week, where we'll be doing virtual meetings with electeds that whole week. So it'd be great to see some leadership jurisdiction. And then Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month, we'll have the Advocacy Week to put on your calendar now is the 19th through the 23rd of April. And then we'll be doing a full day convening on the 27th. So panel discussions, keynote speeches, along a lot of the relevant topics that have come up today. So your voice is needed, your voice is important. And thank you for coming today, because it really helps guide what we can focus on to make sure that you feel advocated for on a local, regional level, and also connected to the state. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. I think we're almost at time. I just want to, on behalf of Californians for the Arts, thank all of you for coming today. It's an amazing turnout. It was really great to hear from all of you directly with your questions, your concerns, your ideas. It's really helpful. And it's going to help Julie and all of us as we go and we interact with our leaders in Sacramento and here around the Bay Area as well. So stay in touch with us, stay involved with Arts and Culture, Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month and all the different things that are coming up. I want to thank you again, thank Julie and all of our speakers for being here today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, Julie, Brad.
Yeah.
Is there a link for the advocacy training? I'm looking on your website, but I don't see it.
Are you referring to the Advocacy 101?
Yeah.
Okay, I can pull that up for you in the chat.
And
Thank
Tina, it's under events.
Okay, great. Thank
But
you.
there's a number of them, so it might be.
One
How
of,
are you?
one of my staff just said she was really interested in advocacy, so it's perfect.
Who did?
One of my staff, my associate.
Oh, yeah. Excellent. How are you doing?
hanging in there, you know, we're really busy. We've actually found a silver lining in all of this. Believe it or not, we're serving twice as many students with our free cultural arts education programs because we went online, and now we're offering it to everybody in Alameda County. So I'm going to write you, Rachel, and let you know about that.
That's great.
It's very exciting. Actually, we used to be limited by the number of kids that we could bus here and serve in our theater, and now we've got, you know, kids all the way down to San Lorenzo and Hayward and San Leandro and all over Alameda County, and serving over 5,000 students.
Wow. And they can access the programs online. Like there's not a digital issue, a digital divide issue.
We're posting them online. So the teachers are the ones who are figuring out how they want to share them with the students. So some of them are facilitating watching together. And we also partnered with the Alameda Education Foundation. So we provide the free cultural arts assemblies, and then they're putting together some resources so the kids have access to visual arts programming. And it's been phenomenally received by the teachers. They're very appreciative and grateful. We have over 400 teachers signed up.
Well, send us a blurb about that and let's highlight it. It should all be highlighted during March is Arts Education Month.
Okay, we will do that. We're very excited and really proud, actually, that we've been able to pull this together. I mean, we literally had a theater full of kids on March 12th, you know, and had all the cancellations coming right and left. And so it's been pretty exciting to be able to pull this off anyways. And my team is really excited about the work they're doing too. So it's been great.
Good. Awesome.
Thanks for asking.
A couple of my commissioners stayed on. Do you, either of you have Margaret or Sasan, do you have something you want to add?
Well, I just got out of a meeting. That's the reason I'm a little late for this one, because the Niles Rotary Club is putting on a fundraiser in March to buy Chromebooks for the kids in our schools. So the more that we have that, the more we can do what Tina is doing and get access for these kids to audiovisual education and the arts. So it seems to be tying together. A lot of things are coming together now.
You were asking before too about things that might continue on even after reopening. And so we're realizing that we probably will continue some form of making materials available online for the classes that aren't able to physically come to our theater. We just have to figure out how to fund it. So. But yeah.
That's the thing that, you know, everyone says it's great. We transitioned, we did all of this sort of stuff, and it's wonderful in terms of broadening our audiences, but it's really challenging to monetize it.
Yeah. And, you know, CAC just cut out all their funding, which was one of our biggest sources because they converted everything to COVID funding now. So we used to get artist exposure grants that helped fund this program. So, and then we don't quite qualify for the general operating because our budget is slightly higher than the $250K that is their priority funding. So we're kind of right in between.
We're getting a lot of feedback about that. So I hope you're sharing that with them as well.
I'm not. Who do I share it with?
I could pull up the link for the public comment, and then you could either put written comment or come during the public portion of the meeting.
It was actually this morning, the meeting. So you can always send comments to the executive director, the chair, and the chair, which I believe it's now is Lilia, since Larry just passed. But Tina, right, I'll send me stuff too, because we're kind of compiling this information.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Bring up as an issue. So even if you don't want to do it directly, just shoot it to me so I can address it, because that's something that we're hearing more than, we're hearing about it.
Yeah. Anyways, I want to thank all of you. This was really great session and very informative and very much appreciated. So thank you all for your hard work.
Yeah. Thanks for your support.
We're out here and we appreciate you.
Thank you for your membership. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Tara, we just ended actually. I saw you just come in. We just finished. We were from 1 to 2:30. So, oh, I don't hear you. You're muted.
I tried to get in at 1, but something didn't go well, and I have multiple PDs today, so sorry I missed you all.
Well, there'll be a recording, and if you registered, you'll get it. So there'll be a recording of it, and you can follow along to the conversation. You're always willing to reach out to us as well if you've got some things you want to share or let us know about. And we're Californians for the Arts. That's who I am.
Okay, awesome, wonderful.
All right. All right, everyone. Good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.